Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Rob again with Perfect Spiral Capital. It's great to be back with you today. Today we're going to get into some common myths and maybe even some not so common myths that exist within the infinite banking space. We're going to take a closer look at those and maybe do a little debunking and understand where some of these come from. As somebody who strives for truthfulness in all that I do, I find it necessary to provide additional education and understanding around some of these myths that exist within this space to help ensure that anyone who's exploring it for the first time or someone who's trying to dig in and learn more can get the right information. I also want to help break down the barriers to the infinite banking concept and make sure that people have an understanding of what those myths and even outright lies are, and then be able to counteract them because they've had the opportunity to learn more about it. In order to do that, I think it's important to level set and lay the proper foundation of what the infinite banking concept really is. First and foremost, it's not a product. The infinite banking concept is a process, and it's a process of implementing the right foundation for a financial system. That process is retaking the banking function that exists in all of our lives. That process of banking is never going to stop. It's something that's going to exist for the rest of our lifetimes. There's never going to be a time where we're likely to not use a bank in some way, shape, or form. So if we have to use a bank, why not use our own? And let's take the time to implement a process that allows us to use our own bank versus another for the rest of our lifetimes. That's really what the infinite banking concept is about. It really is the process of creating a solid foundation for the process of banking that will create the groundwork and the foundation for us to be able to go do all the other things we were already maybe planning to do, or maybe things that we haven't even yet planned to do. It's going to give us that opportunity to make that happen. With that out of the way, let's start to look at some of these myths that exist within the infinite banking space and outline how they are either incorrect or maybe just a simple misunderstanding or potentially even an outright lie. In any case, we're going to dig through them and understand more. This first myth really stems from the fact of a misunderstanding. That first myth is that it's an either or situation. The infinite banking concept is not a choose this or do that type of scenario. Oftentimes, many people think or confuse it with other types of products or other types of strategies out there and assume that if a person chooses the infinite banking concept, they must give up doing something else, whether that's investing or some other thing. When properly implemented, the infinite banking concept gives us the opportunity to use and do the process and do anything we were already planning to do. So it really is a situation of yes and as opposed to either or. It's a part of owning the banking process in our lives and still being able to do any other plan that we were maybe already thinking about or that seems like it's worthwhile to implement in our situation. As I've said before, it's going to take anything that we were already planning to do and simply make it better. So myth number 2, it's a scam. So this one I find kind of funny. And the reason I find it kind of funny, because the infinite banking concept, while it's a process, uses one of the oldest and most highly regulated financial products available to consumers today in the marketplace. And when you think about one of its intended purposes, it's actually there to either reduce or in some cases even completely remove risk in a person's financial situation. If something's there to remove risk, it's hard for it to feel or be like a scam. I truly believe that this myth really comes from people with a simple misunderstanding about the product itself, as well as a misunderstanding about the process of the banking system or creating a banking system that someone owns and controls on their end. It's important that people remember this is a process, not a product. So it's really important that people keep that in mind. And that's likely where a lot of this probably stems from, in people thinking it's an either or option for someone's financial situation, or it's a simple lack of understanding of the process as a whole. To help really solidify this point overall, I'm going to pose you a question or two to help you really think about this a little differently. Does having an income producing asset that has 100% contractual guarantees to only go one way, meaning up, and giving the owner 100% access contractually guaranteed to the funds within the contract and providing a guaranteed death benefit sound like a scam. In today's world, I can certainly understand why someone would maybe have some hesitancy when they hear that there are all these guarantees and that the product is designed to do what it's intended to do. The reality is it doesn't change those truths, and those truths are codified by the guarantees within the contract itself between two private parties, you and the mutual insurance company. So in terms of wrapping this one up, it certainly is most not a scam because it is one of the most highly regulated products and one of the oldest products that exist in the financial landscape. Myth number 3, and that is that it's a simple sales tactic for insurance. And this one's funny to me as well. The reason being is that if someone actually took the time to read Becoming Your Own Banker, they would read right there on page 2, sentence 2, it's not a sales tool for life insurance agents. It is education that the insurance industry should have taught over the last 200 years. So Nelson clearly tells us and demonstrates this right there in the beginning of the book that this is not about selling insurance. It's really about an educational process on how to take back the banking function in a given person's life. That being said, there is a difference between selling IBC, so to speak, and providing actual education about the whole entire process and how it works for an individual. My aim is very simple and straightforward, and that's to provide education for individuals or prospective clients and help them see all the different aspects of the process and then really let them make the decision and determine whether or not it's the right fit for them or if it's something that they would want to pursue. I'm here to help answer questions, provide resources, provide lifetime support for my clients, and provide advice when it's requested all along the way. That's really the way I like to approach the infinite banking concept. It's not about selling something, it's about providing education that allows people to determine the right steps for them in their individual journey. Unfortunately, there are quite a few people out there that have, unfortunately, utilized the term or the name of the infinite banking concept to sell products, as opposed to helping people to understand and educate about a process. And that's just the wrong way to think about things, and sadly gives those of us who are trying to do the right thing for people a bad name in some respects. But we counter that by doing what's right and speaking truth, and that's a lot of what this video is about today. Being that the infinite banking concept is a process and not about products, that does help me segue into our next point. That brings us into myth number 4, that you can use other products besides dividend-paying whole life insurance through a mutual provider to implement the infinite banking concept. And those might be IULs, they might be VULs, or universal life type contracts for the processes of implementing IBC. Again, I'm going to refer you back to Nelson's book in this case, and specifically page 39, where Nelson actually walks through a lot of these products and helps us to see that these other types of products are not suitable for the implementation of the infinite banking concept. And that's because they actually put some of the risk back onto the individual, as well as aren't structured in a guaranteed way to allow for uninterrupted compounding and the growth that's expected to take place within the contract. So there's some limitations that are at play that actually make these products unsuitable for the implementation process of the infinite banking concept. If we were to have this list, so to speak, of all these different areas, and I think Carlos Lara has done a great job of highlighting that in some of his work and his books that he's done, really help us to see that dividend-paying whole life insurance through a mutual provider really is the only product that really checks all of these and allows it to work in the way that the infinite banking concept is intended and should be used and put into play in an individual's life. Simply speaking, though, Nelson was very clear on what product we should be using for the infinite banking concept, and that's the one that we should be talking about in this case. So anybody who's trying to sell a different type of product for use with the infinite banking concept, you probably want to pump the brakes there and really dig in and see how that ties in with what Nelson had stated on page 39. Let's move on to myth number 5, and that is that the infinite banking concept is complex. The process of the infinite banking concept is actually quite simple, and Nelson has even laid this out in his book and just simply states that a lot of times, because it's so simple, it actually feels complex to some people. The reality is that I've probably even made it more complex than what it needs to be at times. Lots of people have done that same thing. In reality, it actually is quite simple in terms of how it's implemented, but it's something I have to challenge myself and other practitioners have to do as well. Recently, one of our fellow practitioners had really challenged us about, let's make sure that we do simple better. That's part of what this myth is all about, is really simplifying what the infinite banking concept is. So you tell me if this process might sound complex to you. Personally, I think it's very simple, but if you feel otherwise, certainly let me know. I'd like to hear from you. So does this sound complex to you? Number one, read Becoming Your Own Banker. That's a foregone requirement in my book. If you're going to implement this process, you have to understand where Nelson is coming from. Two, find an infinite banking concept practitioner that you feel comfortable working with. Three, partner with them and let them know your goals. Let them know what you're thinking about. Let them know what you're trying to do in your situation. Have a few conversations with them to not only become more comfortable, but really just lay out your goals, your dreams, your plans, and see how this process kind of fits into those. A good practitioner is going to take all of that information and then custom design a solution that's going to fit for your particular needs and situation. From there, you're going to implement the process by opening a policy or a series of policies that fits those goals and those needs for your banking system. Then begin using the policies, put them into play, use them to begin to retake that banking function that you have in your life. As we know, everything in life is financed and the need for financing never goes away throughout our lifetimes. You're going to start to use that system and build that system to allow you to do that over the course of your lifetime. So when we really think about it, by going through this simple process, all we did was redirect first and foremost where the money goes first in our financial system. It's going first into a system that we own and control and is guaranteed to grow with you and with your financial situation for the rest of your lifetime. Outside of that, you get to do all the stuff that you were planning to do anyway. So in reality, it's quite simple. Not only is it simple, but owning the banking function and being in the banking business is a very profitable business to be in the first place. And when we first take that back in our own situation, we get to reap the benefits of that instead of somebody else. Let's move on to myth number 6, and that's that there is a specific design or structure to a policy that fits the needs for IBC. Some people are going to say that the only way to properly structure policies for the infinite banking concept are typically for extremely high cash value early on, and that if you do it any other way, you're simply not doing the infinite banking concept properly. Some people will say that there's a specific ratio that you should have for your paid up additions versus the base premium in a policy. And in reality, there is no real perfect design for any situation. There's a lot of different variables that have to be solved for in each individual client's situation, their needs, their desires, what they want to accomplish. There's a lot of different things that come into play. Each particular situation is a challenge to solve for. For someone to go into it with a mindset that a IBC policy, which by the way does not exist, is done a particular way, really just sells short the whole purpose of the concept. In that, remember, it is a process, not a product. The product that we use for it can be structured in specific ways, but it's important to remember that it's a challenge to solve for in every given situation. Each person's needs and desires are a little bit different. How you make that happen and how we accommodate for all these different things that a person wants to do over the course of their lifetime with banking may not take a cookie cutter approach. Simply just saying, well, you need to have X percentage to the PUA in order for it to work for IBC is really the wrong concept. It's the wrong thought process. In reality, if we do any too much of one given thing within policy design, it causes a challenge in a different area. So we have to be thinking holistically about the process, about the goals, about the individual, and tailor that process to those needs that is going to keep a lot of these areas within balance and within reason so that we don't end up in a negative situation for a client at some point in the future. This is why it's really important to work with an infinite banking concept authorized practitioner. And the reason is that for us as practitioners to keep in mind as principles, and that is to think long range, to not be afraid to capitalize, to not steal the peas, to not do business with banks, to rethink our thinking, which is a critical one, and then also be prepared for windfalls. These are things that all need to be kept in mind as we put together policy structure, policy design. And again, I think this is why some people think the infinite banking concept is complex, because they're focusing on the wrong thing, which is the product, instead of really focusing on the process itself. And that's something that working with a trusted professional, such as an infinite banking concept practitioner like myself and others that are in this space, is really important. We help take a lot of that challenge and that complexity out of it. We're going to explain to you what's going on. It's important that you know what's happening, but we're going to help simplify that whole process for you so that you get the best possible design for your specific individualized situation. I do have some more myths that exist for the infinite banking concept, but I think we're going to touch on those in another video, mainly for the sake of time. And they're also myths that tend to come from one or two specific sources. And I think it's better that we address those together in one video. Hopefully you found that this video has been valuable, and I've helped to clear up some of the confusion that may exist around some of these myths that you may or may not have heard. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I'd love to hear from you if you want to reach out via any of my contact information. Otherwise, if it was valuable, feel free to like and subscribe for more of my content, and we'll talk to you again soon.